The video played on every screen in the Hayes mansion, Morgan's clear voice ringing out as she knelt before Kiera in the footage, ring in hand. "Will you marry me, the only person who ever truly saw me?" The family's empire crumbled in an instant, phones exploding with calls from furious partners and scandalized friends, as the engagement to Ethan, son of their biggest business ally, lay in ruins just hours before the ceremony. Morgan stood frozen in the doorway of her childhood bedroom, the wedding dress still hanging untouched on the closet door, while downstairs her father roared into his phone and her mother paced the marble floor in stunned silence. The video she had recorded at midnight and sent to Kiera had somehow leaked to the press within minutes, now trending with hashtags that made her stomach twist. She had not planned for it to go public like this. All she had wanted was one honest moment after years of silence. 5 years earlier, in a cramped dorm at Columbia, Morgan had looked into those same blue eyes and whispered the words she could never take back. "I can't do this, Kiera. My family would never accept it." That night she had walked away, leaving Kiera crying on the steps of the library, choosing instead the path her parents had mapped out since birth: business school, the right social circles, the perfect match with Ethan Caldwell to seal the merger that would make Hayes Global the largest logistics firm on the East Coast. The guilt had never left her. It had only grown heavier with every forced smile at charity galas and every polite kiss she gave Ethan under flashbulbs. Now the truth was out, and the consequences hit like a freight train. Ethan's father, Richard Caldwell, had already canceled the joint venture meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Morgan's phone buzzed again, another text from her cousin. "Aunt Linda just had a panic attack. What the hell were you thinking?" She sank onto the edge of the bed, replaying the proposal clip in her mind. Kiera's surprised laugh, the way her hands had trembled when Morgan slipped the simple silver band onto her finger, the soft promise of "I never stopped loving you." It had felt like breathing for the first time in years. But downstairs the shouting grew louder, and Morgan knew the real storm was only beginning. She slipped out the back service entrance before anyone could stop her, Ubering straight to the small Brooklyn apartment where Kiera had been waiting since the video landed in her inbox. When Kiera opened the door, her eyes were red but steady. "You really did it," she said quietly, pulling Morgan inside. They stood in the narrow hallway for a long moment, the weight of 5 lost years pressing between them. Morgan wanted to apologize, to explain every sleepless night she had spent regretting that dorm room goodbye, but the words stuck. Instead she simply leaned into Kiera's arms and let the tears come. Outside, the city sirens wailed like an accusation. By morning the story had exploded across every news site. Heiress dumps $1 billion match for secret girlfriend, video goes viral. Morgan's mother left frantic voicemails. "The board is meeting without us. Your father is talking about disowning you." Ethan texted once, short and cold. "I deserved better than a public humiliation." Morgan read it while Kiera made coffee, the normalcy of the small kitchen clashing with the chaos on her phone. She had known the risks, but the years of pretending had finally cracked her open. Now she had to face the pieces. Kiera set the mug down gently. "We don't have to figure everything out today, but I need to know you're not running again." Morgan met her gaze and shook her head. "I'm done running." Yet even as she said it, the old fear flickered, her family's expectations, the business empire built on appearances, the community that had praised her as the perfect daughter. The confrontation at the Hayes estate later that afternoon would test that promise in ways she could not yet imagine. The confrontation at the Hayes estate later that afternoon would test that promise in ways she could not yet imagine. Morgan arrived with Kiera beside her, the two of them walking up the long driveway under a sky that threatened more rain. Her father met them at the door, face flushed, tie loosened. Inside. Now. The living room felt smaller than ever, every antique vase and oil painting a reminder of the life she was dismantling. Her mother sat rigid on the velvet sofa, eyes swollen. Ethan and his parents occupied the opposite side of the room like opposing armies. "You threw away everything we built," her father started, voice low and dangerous. "The merger was signed in principle. Now Caldwell is pulling out and the stock is tanking. Do you understand what you've done?" Morgan kept her hand in Kiera's, drawing strength from the steady pressure. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times during those silent years, but the reality still stole her breath. "I understand I hurt people. But I couldn't marry Ethan knowing my heart belonged somewhere else. Richard Caldwell cut in, jaw tight. Somewhere else? You mean this woman you hid from everyone? My son deserved honesty, not a viral humiliation. Ethan refused to look at her, staring instead at the Persian rug. Morgan felt the old guilt surge. Ethan had been kind, patient, never pushing when she kept things surface level. He had not deserved the public spectacle, yet staying would have been its own cruelty. Her mother finally spoke, voice cracking. We gave you every opportunity. Private schools, the best internships. And this is how you repay us. The words landed like stones. Morgan glanced at Kiera, whose face remained calm but whose fingers tightened. In that moment Morgan's mind slipped back again unbidden, to the night she had ended things with Kiera. They had been studying for finals, sharing cheap ramen in Kiera's dorm. Kiera had leaned across the table and said softly, I see a future with you, Morgan. One where we don't have to hide. Morgan had panicked then, hearing her father's voice in her head warning about the family image and the right alliances. She had packed her bag and left without another word. The memory burned fresh now, proof that the wound had never healed, for either of them. The argument stretched for hours. Accusations flew. Selfishness, betrayal, mental breakdown. At one point her father threatened to cut off every trust fund, every credit card. Morgan stood her ground, voice steadier than she felt. I'm not asking for your blessing. I'm telling you who I am. When they finally left the estate, the silence in the Uber was heavy. Kiera spoke first. That was brutal. You okay? Morgan nodded, but inside the guilt gnawed deeper. She had won the immediate battle, yet the war was just starting. Board meetings, media scrutiny, friends choosing sides. That evening they returned to Kiera's apartment and tried to reclaim something normal. Kiera cooked pasta while Morgan set the table, small gestures that felt revolutionary after years of secrecy. But the phone kept buzzing, reporters, distant relatives, even old college friends who had suspected but never asked. Morgan silenced it. For the first time she let herself imagine a life without the weight of expectation. Mornings with Kiera, shared laughter, no more pretending. The vision was beautiful and terrifying. Yet sleep brought no peace. At 3 a.m. Morgan stared at the ceiling, replaying her mother's tears. The woman who had once proudly introduced her at galas now looked broken. Was love worth this much destruction? Kiera stirred beside her, murmuring something soft in her sleep, and Morgan pulled her closer. She had to believe it was. But belief alone would not repair the shattered alliances or quiet the voices calling her selfish. Belief alone would not repair the shattered alliances or quiet the voices calling her selfish. The next weeks blurred into a gauntlet of public statements and private breakdowns. Hayes Global issued a terse press release about personal matters, while the stock continued its slide. Morgan's father stopped taking her calls. Her mother sent one text. I need time. The silence hurt more than shouting. Kiera suggested they escape the city for a weekend at a small cabin upstate. Something neutral and quiet. Morgan agreed, desperate for space to breathe. On the drive north the flashbacks came faster. She remembered the first time she had met Kiera. In a women's studies lecture hall. Kiera raising her hand with quiet confidence while Morgan sat in the back, afraid to speak. Their first date had been a cheap coffee shop near campus, where Kiera had laughed at Morgan's terrible jokes and made her feel seen for the first time. Then had come the pressure. Her father's pointed questions about that friend you're always with. The subtle warnings about how certain choices could jeopardize internships. Morgan had convinced herself that ending it was protection, not cowardice. At the cabin, surrounded by pines and silence, they finally talked about the years apart. Kiera admitted the pain had nearly broken her. She had thrown herself into law school, dated others, but nothing filled the space Morgan left. I kept hoping you'd come back, she said one night by the fireplace. Morgan traced the scar on Kiera's wrist from a long-ago accident and whispered, I never stopped carrying you with me. They kissed then, slow and careful, the kind of kiss that promised healing rather than heat. For the first time Morgan allowed herself to feel unashamed. But the outside world refused to stay away. On Sunday morning her phone lit up with a new headline. Hayes heiress spotted with mystery woman. Business partners demand explanation. Ethan had given an interview, measured but hurt, saying he wished Morgan well but questioned her timing. The community, old money circles, country club friends began to pick sides. Some called it brave. Most called it reckless. Morgan read the comments until Kiera gently closed the phone. You can't live in their verdict. Back in the city, the confrontations escalated. A board meeting turned into an ambush. Morgan was asked to resign her nominal position to protect the brand. She refused, citing the shares she still held. Her father's lawyer delivered formal papers outlining the financial repercussions. Each new blow chipped at her resolve, yet each time she looked at Kiera, the certainty returned. The past rejection had taught her the cost of silence. She would not repeat it. One afternoon, Morgan visited her mother alone. The meeting was icy at first, then raw. I always knew something was different, her mother admitted, voice trembling. But I thought if we gave you the right life, you'd choose it. Morgan hugged her for the first time in weeks. I tried, Mom. I really tried. The admission hung between them, fragile and honest. It was not forgiveness yet, but it was a crack in the wall. Meanwhile, Kiera faced her own pressures. Her conservative family in Ohio had seen the video. Calls came daily urging her to think about her future. Kiera handled them with the same steady grace she had shown Morgan all those years ago. I chose my future the day I said yes to you, she told Morgan one evening. The words anchored her. Yet the chain of confrontations kept coming. Ethan requested a private meeting at a neutral cafe downtown. Morgan arrived alone, heart pounding. He looked thinner, eyes shadowed. I'm not here to yell, he said quietly. I just need to understand why you couldn't tell me sooner. Morgan owed him that much. She spoke of the fear that had kept her silent, the way family expectations had felt like chains. Ethan listened, then nodded once. It still hurts. But I hope you're happy. He left without drama. Yet the encounter left Morgan raw. Guilt, she realized, was not something she could outrun. She could only carry it differently. The media storm intensified. Paparazzi camped outside Kiera's building. Morgan's old friends distanced themselves. Invitations to galas dried up. At a coffee shop one afternoon, an older woman recognized her and muttered, "Disgraceful." Kiera squeezed her hand under the table. Their opinion is not your truth. Still, the judgment chipped away. Morgan began questioning everything. Had she been selfish? Had the proposal video been a cruel way to end things? Nights grew restless again. Then came the turning point. Her father called unexpectedly, voice tight. The Caldwells are suing for breach of the merger agreement. Millions are at stake. If you want any chance of salvaging something, you need to meet us tomorrow. Morgan agreed, but this time she brought Kiera. The conference room felt like a courtroom. Lawyers flanked both sides. Her father laid out the numbers. Lost contracts, reputational damage, potential bankruptcy if the suit succeeded. Morgan listened, then spoke. I can't undo the hurt. But I can offer my shares to stabilize the company. I'll step away from the board. All I ask is that you stop treating me like a traitor. The room fell silent. Her father stared, something shifting in his eyes. Perhaps recognition that the daughter he had molded no longer fit the mold. After hours of negotiation, a fragile agreement emerged. Limited financial support, no public disownment, and time to heal. It was not reconciliation, but it was a beginning. That night, Morgan and Kiera walked along the Brooklyn promenade. City lights glittering on the water. Morgan stopped, turning to face her. I rejected you once because I was afraid. I won't ever do that again. Kiera smiled, the same smile from the proposal video. I know. In that moment, the past and present collided and finally settled. The wounds were still there, but they no longer defined them. Yet redemption was never simple. Morgan still woke some mornings with the taste of guilt. She volunteered at an LGBT youth center, speaking quietly about the cost of hiding. She called her mother weekly, conversations short but steady. The business slowly stabilized under new leadership. Life moved forward, imperfect and honest. Months later, Morgan stood in the same Brooklyn apartment, now officially shared with Kiera. They had painted the walls soft gray and filled the space with books and plants, small symbols of a life chosen together. The viral video had faded from daily headlines, replaced by other scandals. Yet the lessons remained carved deep. Morgan had learned that courage was not the absence of fear but the decision to act anyway. One crisp autumn afternoon she received an invitation she never expected. Her parents' anniversary party, small and private. No pressure. The note read in her mother's handwriting. Morgan showed it to Kiera. Should we go? Kiera nodded. Only if you want to. They arrived together, hands linked. The room fell quiet at first, then slowly warmed. Her father offered a stiff handshake to Kiera. Her mother pulled Morgan aside later and whispered, "I'm proud of the woman you're becoming." The words were simple, but they landed like grace. Still, not every bridge mended easily. Ethan had moved on, engaged to someone new. He sent a polite card wishing them well. The community remained divided. Some welcomed them at events, others crossed the street. Morgan accepted it. She had stopped needing universal approval. Flashbacks still came, softer now. She remembered the night she had first kissed Kiera under the campus oaks, hearts racing with possibility. She remembered the morning after the breakup, waking alone and knowing she had made the wrong choice. Those memories no longer paralyzed her. They reminded her why she had finally chosen truth. Kiera graduated from law school that spring, top of her class. Morgan sat in the audience, tears blurring the stage. Later, at the celebration dinner, she slipped a new ring onto Kiera's finger. This one chosen together, engraved with a single date. The night the video changed everything. Not a replacement, Morgan said softly. A continuation. Kiera's smile was radiant. Yet the story was never only about them. Morgan began mentoring young women facing similar pressures, sharing pieces of her journey without sensationalizing it. She learned that her pain had purpose when it helped others avoid the same silence. The guilt transformed into quiet responsibility. Winter arrived with its own challenges. A new lawsuit threat from a distant investor surfaced, testing the fragile peace with her family. Morgan handled it calmly, negotiating alongside her father for the first time as equals. The experience forged something stronger than before. Respect born of honesty. Respect born of honesty. By the following summer, the worst of the storm had passed. Morgan and Kiera stood on the same rooftop where the viral video had first captured their proposal. Now a private place, they returned to each anniversary. The city stretched below, unchanged yet forever altered in Morgan's eyes. She had lost status, money, and the illusion of control, but she had gained something irreplaceable. A life aligned with her heart. Kiera leaned against the railing, wind lifting her short blonde hair. Still no regrets? Morgan shook her head. Only that I waited so long. They watched the sunset paint the skyline gold. The same lights that once symbolized everything she feared to lose. Now they simply marked another day lived truthfully. The journey had been brutal, public shame, family fractures, moral reckonings that kept her awake at night. Yet each confrontation had stripped away pretense until only the essential remained. Love, courage, and the slow work of repair. Morgan still carried scars, but they no longer dictated her steps. She had awakened late, but she had awakened fully. As the last light faded, Morgan turned to Kiera and asked the question that had echoed through every layer of their story. In choosing her truth, had she destroyed two families beyond repair? Or had she simply freed everyone to build something more honest? Was Morgan right to follow her heart?